Semi-necessary background. In my senior year of high school, I went on foreign exchange to Brazil. I chose Brazil because it's a beautiful tropical country, and I'm a cocky idiot who thinks just because I'm super smart with math science that a whole language, Portuguese, would come easily to me. It didn't. I struggled with the language and found myself in an awkward situation. I'm a clever bloke and am used to being able to express that. I'm that guy who likes to know why everything works the way it does, and I'm used to launching into conversations explanations about how things work at the drop of a hat. But here I sat, unable to express myself as eloquently as I wanted to. So I turned from a talkative, mildly obnoxious it all into a quiet kid. Necessary background. While I was in Brazil on exchange, I was placed into public school. Now, for my American friends, Brazilian high school is a little different from American high school. Instead of students going from class to class, the teachers would switch classrooms between each subject. The teacher, who is the subject of this story, was the English teacher, a man who looked almost identical to Weird Al Yankovic. He began his classes by walking into the room, handing out some English assignments, throwing an English music video on the TV with Portuguese subtitles, and then he'd read the newspaper or a book for the rest of the class. During his first class, while reading his newspaper, he loudly explained that group work was allowed on all assignments and tests, at which point everyone in the class looked at me. Clearly, he was not aware that he had an American exchange student in his class. Subsequently, every one of his classes for the rest of the term, all the students would form a long conga line around my desk, and he wouldn't notice. Of course, the assignments were trivial for me, the equivalent of middle school English, so I'd knock them out instantly, then provide explanations in broken Portuguese along with the answers. The smarter kids in the class would check their answers against mine and give better explanations. By the end of the year, everyone in his class had a perfect grade. Our teacher was ecstatic. Clearly, his teaching style of playing music videos and ignoring students was a success. He threw a small party for us, with food and drinks. At the end of this party, as we were all leaving, I stopped to talk to him in English for the first time since being in his class. "Hey, Professor T, I just wanted to thank you for a fun class." "Of course. Wait, you are American?" "Yes, you didn't know." I left him there, slack-jawed and with a class of students speaking very passable English. So, picture this. It's a muggy summer evening, sweat trickling down my back, and my grandpa, a sprightly old fellow who's seen more sunsets than I've seen Marvel movies, decides he's in desperate need of a cold one. Now, Grandpa isn't your typical bingo, and early, bird special kind of senior. Nope, he's more of a wise-cracking life of the party, aging rebel kind of guy. So there we are, me and Grandpa, cruising down the dusty roads of our little town in his vintage Chevy. We roll up to this sketchy-looking joint that's more rust than neon, but Grandpa insists they have the coldest beer in town. As we saunter in, the door creaks like it's straight out of some old horror movie. I mean, really, it needs some WD, 40 or a swift kick in the hinges. The place is dimly lit, a jukebox in the corner blasting some forgotten 80s tune, and a motley crew of regulars huddled around the bar. Now, let me tell you about Grandpa. He's not one to be messed with. Silver hair, a face lined with tales from yesteryear, and a poker face that could rival a seasoned gambler. The dude's got charisma, even if he's a bit rough around the edges. So Grandpa sidles up to the bar, leans on it like he's James Dean, and orders 2 cold ones. The bartender, a middle-aged lady with a haircut that screams 80s rebellion, glares at us. Let's call her Betty. Betty eyes us up and down like we're intruders in her secret lair. Now, you'd think getting a couple of beers would be the simplest thing in the world, right? Not in this joint. Betty, with a snarky grin, slams the beers down and says, "Cash only. Boys?" We're cool with that. But Grandpa, being the witty gentleman he is, decides to strike up a conversation. "Nice place you got here, Betty. Seen better days, but hey, so have I. Smooth, right?" Betty doesn't seem to appreciate the charm offensive. She shoots back with, "Look, old man, just pay for your beers and leave. I've got a business to run." Grandpa, never one to back down, gives her a sly smile and says, "You know, back in my day, we respected our elders. We also didn't sell beer to kids. Times have changed, huh?" Now, this is where it gets interesting. A couple of kids, probably fresh out of high school, strutting in the joint like they own the place. They head straight for the bar, and Betty, without batting an eyelid, hands them a six-pack of beer. Grandpa, ever the eagle-eyed old man, notices something fishy. He leans over and says, "Hey, Betty, those kids legal?" Betty smirks. "Not your business, old man. Just drink your beer and leave." But Grandpa, he's not having any of it. He calls over the kids and, in the smoothest grandpa move ever, asks for their IDs. Lo and behold, these kids are barely old enough to drive, let alone drink. Grandpa, now in full-on hero mode, turns to Betty and says, "You're in deep trouble, lady." Betty, realizing her little scheme is unraveling, panics. She stammers, "Look, it's none of your business. Mind your own business, Grandpa." But Grandpa isn't about to let this slide. He pulls out his phone, dials 911, and reports the whole shebang. As he's talking to the dispatcher, Betty is sweating bullets, and the kids are nervously shifting from foot to foot. Within minutes, the cops roll up like they're in an episode of Cops. Grandpa, with a triumphant grin, points at Betty and says she's selling booze to minors, officers. The cops, all business, start checking IDs, and sure enough, the kids are underage. Betty, realizing she's caught red-handed, starts babbling excuses like a teenager caught sneaking out past curfew. The cops cuff her. The kids get a stern talking to, and Grandpa, well, he's soaking up the glory. As they leave Betty out, she shoots Grandpa a look that could curdle milk. Grandpa, being the legend he is, just tips his imaginary hat and says, "Maybe next time, Betty." The news of Betty's little operation spreads like wildfire in our small town. The joint gets shut down, and Grandpa becomes the local hero. It turns out this wasn't Betty's first rodeo. She'd been playing fast and loose with the law for years. And just like that, a shady beer-selling business crumbled because Grandpa, with his sharp eyes and quick thinking, decided to play detective in the dimly lit den of debauchery. The town was safer for it, and Grandpa, well, he earned himself a reputation as the wise old sheriff who wasn't afraid to stand up to the likes of Betty. I, 32 female, and my husband got married about 5 years ago. At that time, we decided to have a child, free wedding, and told our respective families of our wishes. We reiterated our feelings on the matter twice verbal and once in written form. The invitation, however, I guess up until the actual invite our families assumed that we were joking, would change our minds or allow a special exception for their specific child children. My husband and I remained firm on our stance. And when the calls and messages from family members came in trying to shame us for our choices, the arguments just seemed to be endless. When we made our decision to hold a child, free wedding, we knew that this meant that some people may not be able to go, so when our families started to say that they couldn't come if their children weren't allowed due to lack of childcare, my husband and I told them that we understood and would send pictures. My parents even went so low as to threaten pulling their financial contribution if we didn't cave in. I was shocked and hurt, but told them that at the end of the day, it was their money, and if they chose this route, my husband and I would be forced to downsize. And the people my parents especially wanted there would be the first on the chopping block, and we would be sure to let them know why. My husband and I seemed to be at a stalemate with our families for about a week before my parents came to us with an apology, along with a few other relatives, and promised to look into other arrangements for childcare. Fast forward to a week before the wedding, my husband overheard his family talking about the plan of secretly bringing the children to the wedding in the attempt to pressure us on the spot the day of the wedding. We were furious, and in an act of passion, my husband and I decided to elope and got married at the courthouse the next day, sending and posting pics while talking about how we just couldn't wait any longer. For years, there was a bit of resentment on both sides, but we were all slowly able to mend fences, especially after the birth of my daughter Elsie, 3 female. Back in October, my cousin Wendy, 37 female, and her husband got married and stated that children were welcome, so my husband and I brought Elsie along. Despite having a nice time, my husband and I couldn't help but feel an oddness with everyone at the event, but thought it was just in our heads until this past Thanksgiving when I confronted my family about their odd treatment of me and my husband. My cousin Brenda, 26 female, then said how everyone found it so hypocritical of my husband and I to bring our own child to Wendy's wedding when we explicitly forbade her and everyone else's kids from coming to ours, and even eloped to spite our families over it. It's been almost over a week and we're arguing, so I have to ask, am I in the wrong? And now, for some comments, you're not in the wrong. Your wedding expectations were no kids, and you made that known. This wedding is Wendy's wedding, and if Wendy wants to allow kids, then she can. This would only be hypocritical if you got mad at Wendy because she wasn't allowing kids to her wedding and you wanted to bring yours. That's not the case, though. As for your family members, it's not their wedding. If they want to bring their kids to a wedding, then they should throw one. You're not in the wrong. Your kid was invited to the wedding she attended. In addition, you didn't plot with your entire family to override the bride and groom's wishes. If they really didn't want your daughter there, the invitation should have read children are invited, except for Elsie as payback for the child. Free wedding her parents never had. But then, all the other guests would know what a HAs they are. You're not in the wrong. They are intentionally mixing things up to make you feel bad. You didn't want kids at your wedding, and Wendy did. I don't see what their problem is other than wanting to be dramatic. So, let me give you some info about this situation. I'm 18 years old. 17 years old when this happened. I live in the Netherlands and I work at a local supermarket where I work as a stock clerk. Don't really know how to translate that. Almost every week, we have a discount on certain items. It's called the bonus, and sometimes when you buy 3 items from one brand, you get some special product from that brand. A beer glass when you buy a 6-pack of that brand. A Lipton iced tea hat when you buy a certain amount of bottles, etc. That week, when you bought 3 items from this kid's brand, you get this rather creepy-looking doll. This is basically what the story is based around. And, oh boy, am I glad we don't offer kids toys with these products anymore. Just like everyone in this subreddit, I never thought something like this would happen to me, but here we go. It did. I was working in the afternoon on a Thursday like usual when a kid walks by slowly. Of course, I don't think anything of this as I am just doing my job. She walks by about 3 times, and the 4th time she asks me if the dolls are out of stock. I explained to her that more will be coming that evening, and that she would unfortunately have to wait. She asked how late, and I told her that they would probably arrive after closing time because of a delayed shipment, so she would have to wait until the next day. She walked away with quite a sad face, and I felt bad for her. Although I continued working, I didn't really think about it anymore. Fast forward a bit to around 2 hours later. It's almost closing time. Just 5 more minutes, and I was pretty tired. This is where the entitled mother comes in without the entitled kid. She looked angry. The mother stomps straight towards me and quite angrily asks me if I was the boy that told her daughter that she couldn't have one of those dolls. Me, being tired, looks at her with a confused face, and after processing the question, I remember the kid that asked for the doll. Me. Yes, that's me. Entitled, Mother, do you know you made my little girl cry? Me. I'm sorry for upsetting your daughter, but the dolls are out of stock and won't arrive until... She cuts me off. I don't care about the time it arrives. You will get me a doll right now or I will make sure you get fired. I will do everything to make sure more dolls arrive as soon as possible, but the store closes in 5 minutes and... She cuts me off again. I want to look in the back. I don't believe you. She was pretty much screaming at the moment. I saw a colleague of mine in another part of the store look up from the work he was doing and listen to where the noise was coming from. He just continued doing his work, and I did not want to call him because I thought I could handle this myself. Nah. I bring the entitled mother to the back where we keep the dolls, when we have them. I normally never let people into this section because it's only for employees, but I didn't want her to go super Karen, so I let her in. I grab one of the terminals. It's a small device that we use to keep track of the stock in the warehouse and the quantity of products we order in the next shipment. I showed her that there are currently no dolls in the store, and before I could show her the order we placed for new dolls, she grabbed the terminal, which is worth around 1,400 euros or $1,600, and throws it on the ground. I immediately asked my boss to come to the warehouse through my earpiece. The entitled mother knows she can't touch me or cause me any harm because, 1, I'm under the age of 18, so it's basically child abuse, and 2, there's cameras everywhere and she already knew that. But apparently, only point 1 interests her, and she proceeds to kick all the wagons of goods we have standing in the warehouse. She also threw 6 packs of wine and beer on the floor, which made a horrible mess. After about 1 minute of this constant fear in me, my boss and 3 team leaders arrive in the warehouse to take a look at the situation. My boss was, well, not happy with the situation. Apparently, he took some kind of fight training because it grabs the entitled mother in a certain position so she is pinned on the ground with nowhere to move. One of the team leaders is asked to call the police. Within 20 minutes, the police arrived at our warehouse. I was surprised that the woman did not attempt to kick or slap my boss because she has been laying on the ground for this long. The two policemen are guided to the office by two team leaders while me, the third team leader, and my boss are still in the back of the store. After about 10 minutes, which felt like an eternity for me, the policemen and team leaders came back and one of the policemen put the woman in handcuffs. After that, we all go to the office. The entitled mother is giving me death glares the entire way there. She also kind of whisperingly swears at me and calls me all the names out there. When we get to the office, I feared I would have done something wrong that would indeed get me fired. And this begins with the entitled mother having the right to talk before me. Of course, she lies in a pretty big way, literally saying that I touched her kid. The officers probably already knew that was not the case and asked some questions about that to me. I was struggling to find the right words because I have never been in a situation like this and I was on the verge of crying. I told them they needed to check the camera footage from 2.5 hours before this. They found the moment where the girl came up to me and I didn't put a finger near her. The boss complimented me for keeping enough distance due to COVID, but that didn't really come through to me because I could only think of what could happen if they did not believe me. I knew the proof was there that I didn't touch the entitled kid at all. That was nice to know. The policeman knew enough and took the woman away from us, probably off to the police station where she deserves to be. My boss and team leaders compliment me on handling the situation and come with me to the warehouse to help me clean up. My boss noticed I wasn't in a good state to continue working and he gave me a can of soda and told me I could go to the break room to take a break to cool down from this. Eventually, he just sent me home because I was too emotional from all the threats the DOI Brennoman was constantly telling me. When I came home, I told my parents the entire story and they were shocked. They asked me if I wanted to continue working there and I did. There was nothing wrong with the place itself, just very rarely the people that buy stuff there. My boss and I later made the rule of not doing this with dolls and children's toys anymore because this happened a few times before, not this bad. It would solve the problem of entitled kids and I have never seen one ever since.